Alright, in this video, we're going to be looking at another very common tool that we'll be using in calculus, or when finding derivatives, rather. And that's going to be the product rule. We already looked at the power rule, which helped us solve a couple derivatives very fast. So the product rule is just another one of these tools that we'll be using a lot. So the the product rule looks something like this. If we have a function, first our product rule. So if we have some function h of x that's equal to some f times g, again, it's the product of two different components as the name would suggest, well then the derivative of our h of x, h prime of x, is going to be equal to f prime times g plus f times g prime. So this looks a bit confusing for us, immediately, but it'll make a lot more sense when we look at it in practice. But really what we're doing here is we're taking the derivative of the first component here and multiplying it with the original function, or the original part that's, the g here, and to it we're adding the original f times the derivative of our g. And so as you can see, this is addition, which means that this is commutative, which means we could write it in the other order too, right? This is the same thing as if we want to do f times g prime plus f prime times g. These are, they're both equivalent statements here, so they're both the same. But this is going to be our product rule. So let's look at it in practice, and I promise it'll make a lot more sense. So if we're told that we have a function, like this, our h of x, that's equal to 6x sine x. We can see that this is really the product of two different things. We can call the 6x the first part and the sine x the second. So this would then be our f, and this is our g. So we can write this out almost as the different components first if you want, before we put it together. We know that our h prime of x is going to be equal to f prime g plus f g prime. So let's get each of those components, right? We know that our f is 6x, and we know that our g is sine of x. What is the derivative of our f? Our f prime. The derivative of 6x is just 6. The derivative of sine x is just cosine of x. So now we just use these and put it together. So that means that our h prime of x is going to be equal to f prime, that is 6, times g, which is sine of x, plus f, which is 6x, times g prime. G prime is cosine of x. And this is going to be our answer. The derivative of our function 6x times sine x is going to be 6 sine x plus 6x cosine x. So hopefully you can see how this is working here. We just need to remember this is just another one thing we had to commit to our memory. We had to commit our power rules, the logarithmic functions, the exponentials, the sine and cosine derivatives. This is just another thing that we commit to memory, but I promise you'll be using it so often that it shouldn't be too hard. You'll just definitely remember this. So let's look at another example problem. Let's clear this up and look at another example. Let's say we have another function, h of x, and it's equal to, our function here is the cube root of x times 3 times e to the x. So here again, we have to first identify what our two components are. Clearly this is going to be our first term, the cube root of x. Cube root of x can be our f, and our g can then just be 3 times e to the x. So if we want to just write out our product rule here again, just to refresh our memories, we can remember that's going to be f prime times g plus f times g prime. So if we then again, as we did, identify each component, write them out, f is just the cube root of x, g is 3 times e to the x. So then our f prime Well, we know that the cube root of x is just another, can be written in another way, just x to the 1/3. So we can use our power rule here. And if we want to find the derivative of our e to the x, or 3 times e to the x, we know that the derivative of e to the x is just e to the x. This is something we looked at in the last video, so this is just going to remain the same. And now if we wanted to find this derivative here, remember all we have to do is we bring the 1/3 over to the front, and from this exponent we subtract 1. So 1/3 minus 3rd minus 3/3 is negative 2/3. Negative 2/3. So the answer here is going to be this guy over here. So if we want to just erase this and put in our derivative as 1/3, we can again write this a bit more neatly as just 1/3 times the cube root of x squared. So we now have our f, our g, our f prime, and our g prime. So all we have to do is put it all together. So our h prime of x is going to be f prime, which is 1/3 times the cube root of x squared, times g, which is 3 times e to the x, plus, if you want to put this together like that, plus our f, which is the cube root of x, times the g prime, which is 3 times e to the x. So this is going to be our answer here. If we want to go ahead and further simplify this, we can do that, obviously. And so we can see that these two 3's will cancel out, leaving us with e to the x divided by the cube root of x squared plus the cube root of x times 3 times e to the x. And this is our answer. This expression here is the derivative of our initial function. Meaning, again, this plugging in any x value here would output the slope of the tangent line at that specific point for our initial h of x function. So this is how you use the product rule here. It can get a little messy just because there's a lot of moving parts, but I think that definitely writing out each of the components, the f prime and the g and the f and the g prime, having those separately spaced out and then just putting them all together in our our function here would make it a lot easier and make sure that you don't forget anything. So I definitely do recommend you do that, at least when you're first starting off. But in any case, that brings us to the end of this video. Hopefully you found it helpful. I'm sure you're going to be using the product rule a lot, so it's important that you learn this and you're able to use it well. But if you did find this video useful, please show your support by liking and subscribing. Leave in the comments any questions that you may have and what you'd like to see for some future videos, and I will see you in the next one.